My stepfather's daughter turned the family against me while stealing his money, but when I found his private letters and safety deposit box, I pulled the ultimate Uno reverse. When I was 14, my mom left me and my stepdad Norman after he got diagnosed with early onset dementia, and I became his full-time caregiver because someone had to be, and she sure wasn't going to stick around to watch him disappear piece by piece. For 5 years, I've been sleeping on his bedroom floor, managing his medications, and dealing with his episodes where he thinks strangers are in the house at 3 in the morning. Last week, Norman's lawyer called me about updating his will, per his daughter Stephanie's request, and my blood went cold because Stephanie hasn't visited once in the 3 years since the diagnosis got even worse. I told the lawyer I'd been Norman's caregiver this whole time, and he got this weird tone and said, "Miss, you'll need to provide receipts for any care expenses if you want reimbursement," like I was some kind of hired help trying to scam the family. That same day, I was helping Norman with his medications when he had one of his lucid moments and asked me what happened to my college applications. I deflected like always, because how do you tell someone you love that you gave up your entire future to take care of them? Then I noticed something strange on the kitchen counter. Norman had left out a bank withdrawal slip for $800 cash from last month, and when I asked him about it during his next clear moment, he looked confused and said Stephanie told him he needed to help with her school expenses. My heart sank because I realized she had been visiting during my grocery runs and manipulating him for money. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I knew she was in graduate school somewhere, so I created a fake social media account to see what she was posting. What I found made me sick. Her LinkedIn profile listed her current position as full-time caregiver for her father with dementia, and she had photos with Norman from years ago, with captions about just finishing his physical therapy session and how much he was improving under her care. There was a GoFundMe page titled "Help Me Care for My Dad," with $15,000 raised. All the photos were old ones of her and Norman from before I even knew them. I felt nauseous reading the comments from people praising her devotion and sacrifice. I tried calling Stephanie, but she immediately got defensive, asking who I thought I was and saying she was his daughter and handled all his care decisions before hanging up on me. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I checked our cheap security camera footage that I had bought to monitor Norman when he wandered, and found clips of Stephanie coming into the house during the times I ran errands twice a week. She would wait for me to leave, then stay for about 20 minutes. All of these visits always happened right before Norman's worst confusion episodes. I started writing down everything because something felt horribly wrong. During Norman's next lucid moment, I asked him about Stephanie, and his face got agitated, and he said she visits all the time and brings special vitamins that help his memory, and asked why I was trying to confuse him. I realized she had been giving him something during his confused states and telling him I was the one making him sicker. 3 days later, Aunt Marie called me furious, saying Stephanie told the family I had been stealing Norman's medication money and isolating him from everyone who cared. I tried to explain that I had been his only caregiver for years, but Marie cut me off saying Stephanie would never lie about caring for her father, and that maybe it was time I found my own place. The next morning, the lawyer called again and informed me that Stephanie was petitioning for guardianship, and I had no legal standing despite 5 years of caregiving because I wasn't blood family and had no official caregiver documentation. My world was falling apart, and I realized Stephanie had been systematically turning everyone against me. I knew she wouldn't care for him properly, so I called Adult Protective Services, but when I tried to explain the situation, they said they would need to investigate both caregivers and that the process could take weeks or months. The caseworker warned me that making false accusations could result in me being removed from the home immediately. Yesterday, Stephanie showed up with a locksmith, saying she was changing the locks for Norman's safety and that I needed to pack my things because she was moving in to provide proper care. I was secretly recording this on my phone when Norman shuffled into the room looking confused and saw Stephanie directing the locksmith. He turned to me with clear eyes for just a moment and asked me who Stephanie was and why she was in his home. I frantically explained to Norman that Stephanie was his daughter while holding my phone up to capture everything, but Stephanie lunged forward and grabbed for it, her manicured nails scratching my wrist as we struggled. The locksmith stepped back awkwardly, tools clanging against his belt, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before him. During our struggle near the front door, Norman's face contorted with terror. He started screaming that strangers were robbing him, his voice carrying through the open windows. Neighbors began appearing at their windows, and I saw Mrs. Chen from next door step onto her porch, concern etched across her face. What she saw was Stephanie gently placing her hands on Norman's shoulders, speaking in soothing tones while I stood there disheveled, phone in hand, looking desperate. I tried explaining to Mrs. Chen that Stephanie was manipulating the situation, but my words came out jumbled and frantic. Mrs. Chen's expression shifted from concern to wariness as she watched Stephanie expertly calm Norman down, stroking his arm and calling him dad in a voice dripping with false sweetness. Mrs. Chen mentioned she knew Stephanie from her recent caregiving visits during grocery runs, which made my stomach drop. Stephanie had been building her credibility with the neighbors while I was out getting Norman's prescriptions. Mrs. Chen suddenly clutched her chest, mentioning her husband's chest pains that had been worrying her for days. She needed someone to drive her to the emergency room immediately. Without missing a hit, Stephanie volunteered, already reaching for her car keys and asking Mrs. Chen which hospital she preferred. The contrast was stark. There I stood, still gripping my phone like evidence of a crime, while Stephanie transformed into the neighborhood hero. I faced an impossible choice: leave Norman alone with the locksmith who was clearly on Stephanie's payroll, or help Mrs. Chen and risk losing access to my home forever. My decision was instant. I couldn't abandon Norman, not after 5 years of protecting him. I watched Stephanie guide Mrs. Chen to her car, shooting me a triumphant look over her shoulder. The other neighbors saw me standing there, not helping, looking selfish and paranoid, while I tried to comfort Norman inside, explaining that the locksmith was just fixing the door. I could hear Stephanie outside establishing her narrative with arriving family members. Uncle David's car pulled up, followed by Aunt Marie's minivan. Through the window, I watched Stephanie gesturing animatedly, occasionally wiping away what looked like tears. The family members nodded sympathetically, casting dark looks toward the house where I remained with Norman. Norman's medication alarm started beeping from the kitchen. As I guided him to his chair and prepared his pills with the careful routine I'd perfected over years, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Adult Protective Services. At the exact same moment, I heard car doors slamming outside. Through the kitchen window, I saw a man in a suit carrying a briefcase, walking alongside Stephanie toward the front door. Her lawyer had arrived with what I assumed were custody papers. The caseworker on the phone asked for an update on the situation. I tried to keep my voice steady while measuring out Norman's medications, explaining that I was currently administering his noon pills according to his doctor's strict schedule. The caseworker sounded impressed by my knowledge of each medication's purpose and timing, but then she asked about the commotion she could hear in the background, and I realized my competence was about to be used against me. If Norman needed such precise, constant care, wouldn't he be better served in a professional facility or with multiple caregivers? Stephanie entered the kitchen just as Norman finished taking his pills. Her face crumpled when he looked at her blankly, not recognizing his own daughter. She collapsed into a kitchen chair, hyperventilating, clutching her chest. The tears seemed genuine this time, her breathing ragged and desperate. The caseworker could hear everything over the phone, asking if someone was having a medical emergency. Even Norman looked concerned, reaching out to pat Stephanie's shoulder awkwardly. Then, in one of those cruel twists of timing, Norman's fog lifted momentarily. He smiled at Stephanie, his eyes focusing with recognition. He thanked her for taking such good care of him lately, mentioning how her visits always made him feel better. My heart shattered. She had programmed these responses into him during his confused states, and now his own words were condemning me. I noticed Norman's recent secretive behavior around the kitchen had centered on one particular drawer. Following his gaze during his lucid moment, I spotted the edge of a notebook tucked behind the utensil organizer. It looked like his handwriting on the visible corner. A medication journal, maybe, or notes about his condition. Evidence that could prove something, anything. But the caseworker was asking me direct questions, and Stephanie's lawyer was now in the doorway, watching my every move. I couldn't access the drawer without looking suspicious. The caseworker mentioned she would need to visit for an assessment. When I explained my sleeping arrangements, there was a long pause. She asked me to repeat that I slept on Norman's bedroom floor. I tried explaining it was for his safety, that he had episodes at night, but her tone had changed. Meanwhile, Stephanie interjected smoothly that she had already set up a proper guest room with a baby monitor system for nighttime care. Professional, appropriate. Everything my makeshift floor bedding was not. The next morning, Norman's doctor called, needing his complete medical history for an upcoming procedure. The files were scattered, some at the house, some in Stephanie's possession from when she'd intercepted mail during her secret visits. I found myself in the humiliating position of having to ask Stephanie for cooperation. She agreed sweetly, but only if I acknowledged her as the primary caregiver to the medical staff. Aunt Marie cornered me that afternoon, her face twisted with disgust. She compared my behavior to my mother's breakdown after the divorce, saying I was spiraling just like Sarah had. The words stung because there was enough truth in them to make me doubt myself. Was I becoming obsessive? Was I the one causing problems? The family group text became a battlefield. Every time I tried to defend myself, my messages were screenshot and shared as evidence of my instability. Stephanie had created a separate chat called Helping Dad, where family members coordinated care plans that deliberately excluded me. My desperate attempts to be included were met with silence or gentle suggestions that I needed to focus on my own mental health. When I tried showing the security footage of Stephanie's secret visits to the family, her lawyer immediately sent a cease and desist letter, claiming I was stalking and harassing his client. The footage that I thought would save me became evidence of my obsession. Even Uncle David, who had always been kind to me, suggested I might need professional help. Stephanie now controlled Norman's insurance cards, having somehow obtained power of attorney using signatures from old documents in Norman's files. The handwriting looked authentic because she'd traced his signature from birthday cards and old paperwork. She scheduled his medical appointments during times she knew I couldn't attend, slowly erasing my presence from his care team. Exhaustion was destroying me. During Norman's doctor appointment that I'd fought to attend, I dozed off in the waiting room chair. The medical staff exchanged glances, and I heard one nurse whisper something about substance abuse. My red eyes and shaking hands from stress and sleeplessness painted a picture I couldn't refute. Mr. Rodriguez from down the street had been my only supporter, occasionally checking on us and offering to testify about my years of dedication. But when his wife threatened divorce over getting involved in family drama, he withdrew his offer. He apologized with tears in his eyes, but he couldn't lose his marriage over our situation. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when I approached. The pharmacy technician who'd known me for years suddenly became formal and distant. I overheard two neighbors mentioning a Facebook group where Stephanie was documenting her father's care journey. The post painted me as an unstable young woman who'd attached myself to a vulnerable elderly man. Stephanie's claim that I'd been stealing medication money aligned perfectly with bank security footage showing me using Norman's debit card at the pharmacy. Without context, it looked exactly like theft. The fact that I'd been buying his prescriptions for 5 years didn't show up on grainy security footage. My therapist, who I'd started seeing to cope with caregiver stress, informed me she'd need a referral from Stephanie to continue our sessions under the new insurance protocol. The safe space where I'd vented about the challenges of caring for Norman was now closed to me, and those same sessions would be subpoenaed as evidence of my resentment. I managed to prove Stephanie had lied about one small detail regarding Norman's medication schedule, but in doing so, I accidentally revealed that I'd missed his dental cleanings for 2 years. My minor victory became a larger defeat, highlighting my failures as a caregiver. The mail carrier witnessed my relief at catching Stephanie in a lie. My exhausted smile and small fist pump of triumph were later described in a statement as celebration over Norman's declining condition. Every human moment became evidence against me. The battle lines were drawn. Stephanie and I stared at each other across Norman's living room, both understanding that this fight would destroy one of us completely. There was no middle ground, no compromise possible. Only one of us could be Norman's caregiver, and the other would lose everything. The following week, Stephanie's new boyfriend appeared at Norman's favorite diner. Jake had been my lab partner in high school, someone who'd helped me through chemistry when my mind was already consumed with caring for Norman. Now he sat across from Stephanie, laughing at her stories about Norman's baseball card collection. I watched from the parking lot as Jake quoted Norman's favorite team statistics naturally, information Stephanie must have fed him. The betrayal cut deeper than any family member's defection. I confronted them in the diner parking lot. Jake's genuine confusion when I explained my side made everything worse. He truly believed Stephanie's version of events, thought he was dating a devoted daughter sacrificing everything for her father. When I showed him photos on my phone of me caring for Norman over the years, Stephanie smoothly explained them away as documentation of my unhealthy obsession. Jake looked at me with pity, the same expression I'd seen on so many faces lately. The caseworker scheduled her home visit for the following Tuesday. I spent days preparing, organizing medication logs, and creating detailed care schedules. But when she arrived, Stephanie was already there with professional-looking binders documenting Norman's care needs. The caseworker asked us separately about a specific medication conversation from last month. Stephanie described administering his evening pills while I insisted I'd handled that dose. We couldn't both be right, but we each believed our version completely. The caseworker's expression grew increasingly concerned about the conflicting narratives. That evening, I discovered my old phone in a drawer and scrolled through texts from 2 years ago. My stomach dropped as I read my own words complaining about Norman's care burden, messages I'd sent to a friend during a particularly difficult week. Stephanie had somehow obtained screenshots and included them in her guardianship petition. The texts made me sound resentful and overwhelmed, ready to abandon Norman at the first opportunity. During Norman's next lucid moment, he started talking about his college days, then suddenly mentioned being sick while I was away at school. His timeline was completely wrong, but he seemed certain about it. He also mentioned his safety deposit box at the bank, something he'd never discussed before. When I pressed for details, his clarity faded, leaving me with more questions than answers. The next morning, I discovered our neighbor's Ring doorbell had captured me during one of my worst moments. The footage showed me yelling at Norman after he'd thrown his breakfast across the kitchen during a confused episode. My frustration and exhaustion were clearly visible, my voice sharp with irritation. What the camera missed was Stephanie's visit the previous day, when she'd changed his routine and confused him about meal times. The footage made me look abusive, while her manipulation remained invisible. The family court mediator treated my concerns about Stephanie's financial exploitation as an attempt to alienate Norman from his biological daughter. She suggested I might be projecting my own abandonment issues onto the situation. Every piece of evidence I presented was reframed as jealousy or mental instability. Desperate for proof, I used Norman's saved passwords from years of helping him with online banking. His email revealed searches about dementia and inheritance law from 6 months ago, during one of his clearer periods. He'd been researching how family members exploit elderly relatives. The discovery felt like vindication, until I realized I'd violated his privacy to find it. Stephanie's social media campaign intensified. Her posts about protecting vulnerable loved ones and dealing with difficult family situations garnered hundreds of supportive comments. She never mentioned me directly, but anyone following the story could fill in the blanks. Local community members began treating me like a pariah. My therapist received a subpoena to testify about our sessions. The notes I thought were confidential would now be twisted to show my resentment toward Norman and his family. Every moment of honest frustration I'd expressed in that safe space would be weaponized against me. I attempted to record Stephanie's next visit, but my phone battery died at the crucial moment. When family members arrived shortly after, they found me frantically trying to charge my phone while insisting Stephanie had just confessed to manipulating Norman. My desperation made me look deranged. Later, I noticed the charging cable had been unplugged, though I couldn't prove Stephanie had done it. Norman's physical therapy appointment created a crisis. Insurance required the primary caregiver's presence, and Stephanie had positioned herself for that role. If she missed the appointment, coverage would lapse. I watched her charm the physical therapist while I sat in the waiting room, legally barred from participating in his care. The physical therapist later reported my concerning questions about family dynamics to the caseworker. She explained she had professional obligations to report any signs of family conflict that might endanger a vulnerable adult. Her choice to protect her license over supporting the truth felt like another betrayal. One night, I found Stephanie sleeping in Norman's bed during what she called overnight care. She wore his late wife's robe, the familiar scent of lavender fabric softener filling the room, the intimacy of her deception, the way she'd inserted herself into every aspect of his life made me physically ill. Stephanie offered me a deal. She would let me say goodbye to Norman properly before moving him to a memory care facility if I dropped all accusations against her. The offer revealed her endgame, getting Norman into a facility where she could control all access and decisions. My refusal was framed as selfishly keeping him from professional care. I discovered I'd been wrong about when Stephanie's manipulation began. A receipt in Norman's jacket showed she'd visited during my mother's final weeks with us, not after she left. The revelation shattered my timeline and made me question everything I thought I knew about the situation. Both Stephanie and I realized Norman had been hiding documents throughout the house. Some protected her rights as his biological daughter, legal papers that predated my involvement. The complexity of his preparations suggested he'd known this conflict was coming long before either of us recognized it. My supposed proof of financial abuse crumbled when Norman's email revealed correspondence about Stephanie's student loan crisis from 2 years ago. He'd been trying to help her with legitimate expenses, not being exploited. The discovery made me look like I'd been preventing a father from helping his struggling daughter. Uncle David faced an impossible choice. Supporting my version of events would mean Stephanie would cut off his access to his grandchildren. He chose family peace over truth, eliminating my only witness to Norman's previous clear statements about wanting me to handle his care. Desperation drove me to adopt Stephanie's tactics. I befriended Norman's confused neighbors, gathering evidence of her manipulation. The moral compromise of exploiting other vulnerable elderly people for information ate at my conscience, but I saw no alternative. I orchestrated a chance encounter with Norman's former co-worker at the pharmacy, engaging in small talk about the weather while mentally cataloging every detail he shared about Norman's work history. The calculation required for these interactions transformed me into someone I didn't recognize. Norman's old work laptop, found in his home office, contained saved passwords and documents revealing his concerns about family exploitation. The evidence felt like a lifeline until I realized I'd violated his privacy again to find it. Norman's ex-sister-in-law emerged with claims about promised family heirlooms. Her sudden interest in the estate complicated an already tangled situation. Every new person who appeared seemed to have their own agenda regarding Norman's assets. The mounting stress caused me to miss Norman's cardiac screening appointment. The medical record now showed a pattern of negligence that supported Stephanie's claims about my inadequate care. Each mistake compounded the previous ones. My credit cards maxed out from legal consultations while Stephanie freely used Norman's accounts for her expenses. The financial disparity meant she could afford better lawyers while I struggled to find anyone willing to take my case. A public confrontation at Norman's favorite diner traumatized the longtime waitress who'd known his late wife. She begged us to stop fighting in front of other customers, her tears genuine as she remembered better times. The incident became another mark against my stability. I lost my part-time job when the manager explained my personal drama was affecting customer service. My replacement turned out to be one of Stephanie's college friends, though I couldn't prove the connection was intentional. intentional. The loss of income made my situation even more precarious. After Mr. Rodriguez's wife made their house uncomfortable, I slept in my car outside Norman's home. I watched Stephanie's silhouette moving through the master bedroom she'd claimed as the live-in caregiver. The physical displacement mirrored my emotional state. Aunt Marie begged me to let Norman have peace in his final years. Her words echoed what everyone seemed to think, that my fight for the truth was hurting the person I claimed to protect. The accusation that I was torturing him with this conflict cut deeper than any legal threat. My investigation inadvertently got Norman's former co-worker questioned by HR about sharing confidential information. His daughter asked why her father seemed worried, and I realized my pursuit of justice was creating innocent victims. The co-worker's marriage strained under the pressure of workplace investigations and association with our family drama. The weight of destroying other people's lives for evidence became unbearable, but stopping meant abandoning Norman to Stephanie's care. Uncle David asked me directly what if I was wrong about everything. The question hung in the air because I couldn't answer immediately. Doubt crept in like fog. I publicly admitted to neglecting Norman's social needs during his early care years, hoping honesty about my failures would lend credibility to my current accusations. Instead, it provided more ammunition for Stephanie's case against me. The evidence I'd gathered revealed uncomfortable truths about my own caregiving. Norman had made subtle requests for family contact during his first year that I'd ignored, too overwhelmed with medical needs to recognize his emotional ones. The realization that I'd contributed to his isolation was devastating. Stephanie's lawyer filed an emergency motion to move the court hearing up 3 months, citing Norman's rapidly declining condition. My own lawyer was on a pre-planned vacation, leaving me scrambling for representation during a critical moment. I began to understand that Stephanie genuinely believed she was rescuing Norman from my institutional neglect. She'd convinced herself that her narrative was true, that she was the devoted daughter saving her father from an unstable caregiver. The sincerity of her delusion made her more dangerous than calculated evil would have been. Her motivation mixed genuine love for Norman with a desperate need to be his real caregiver after years of absence. The complexity of her emotions made her actions harder to combat because she fought with the righteousness of someone who believed their own lies. To match Stephanie's tactics, I had to become calculating and manipulative, everything Norman had taught me not to be. Breaking my promise to always be better than family drama felt like betraying him more than any legal document could. My former honest, direct self died as a strategic, paranoid version emerged. Every interaction became a chess move, every conversation a potential trap. The transformation was necessary but soul-crushing. During a family gathering, Stephanie's young nephew innocently volunteered information about his aunt's activities. The child became an unwitting witness, his casual comments about Aunt Stephanie's visits more damning than any adult testimony. Using a child's innocence for evidence felt like crossing a moral line I couldn't uncross. A minor victory in court felt hollow when I saw Stephanie's genuine tears at Norman's bedside. We both cried over the same person we claimed to love, both believing we were protecting him from the other. The shared grief complicated my anger. Stephanie's counterclaim gained traction when she submitted my old therapy notes about caregiver burnout. Every moment of weakness I'd expressed in confidence became evidence of my unsuitability. The system designed to help me cope became another weapon against me. Everything now depended on testimony from Norman's original diagnosis doctor, who remembered the early family dynamics. Finding him required resources I didn't have, and connections Stephanie had already poisoned against me. My past kindness to Stephanie's young son became leverage when he asked why I was being mean to his mother. His innocent face and genuine confusion made me question whether my fight was worth traumatizing another generation. Norman's former colleagues chose sides based on pension fund politics rather than truth. Their loyalty to their own interests overrode any obligation to honesty about Norman's wishes. The legal systems designed for clear-cut abuse cases left no room for complex family manipulation. Emotional abuse without physical evidence became impossible to prove. The caseworker explained this reality with sympathy that didn't help my situation. I reached out to Norman's professional contacts who owed him favors from his working years. Most declined to get involved, but one agreed to provide character testimony. His support came with conditions that limited its effectiveness. That contact revealed Norman had known about potential inheritance manipulation before his dementia worsened. He'd been trying to protect me legally, gathering evidence of his own. The discovery reframed our entire relationship, but confirmed my suspicions about systematic exploitation. The crucial evidence waited in Norman's safety deposit box that he'd mentioned during his lucid moment. Accessing it required legal authority I didn't have, creating another frustrating deadlock. The promise of vindication just out of reach tormented me. I need to write the ending section, beat 76 to 100, that resolves this caregiving exploitation story realistically, while maintaining 97% action until the very end. The contact's revelation about Norman's protective efforts sent me racing to the bank the next morning. I presented my caregiver documentation, and Norman's old letters mentioning me to the bank manager, who agreed to review my request for safety deposit box access. While waiting, I noticed Stephanie entering the bank's other entrance, her lawyer trailing behind. We locked eyes across the marble lobby, both understanding this moment would determine everything. The bank manager emerged with forms requiring judicial approval for access. I spent the afternoon at the courthouse filing emergency petitions while Stephanie's lawyer filed counter motions. The clerk mentioned seeing similar family disputes weekly, her weary expression suggesting most ended badly. I submitted Norman's handwritten notes from years ago, hoping his past clarity would speak for him now. That evening, I discovered Norman had been gathering evidence about potential exploitation long before his condition worsened. Hidden in his workshop, I found photocopies of articles about elder abuse, with dates showing he'd been researching this 3 years ago. His handwriting in the margins revealed his fears about family members taking advantage during his decline. The systematic preparation showed he'd tried to protect himself and me, even as his mind began failing. The judge approved limited access to the safety deposit box under supervision. At the bank, the manager opened the metal container while Stephanie's lawyer documented everything. Inside lay sealed envelopes dated 2 years prior, Norman's shaky handwriting labeling them with our names. The envelope marked for me contained signed statements about his concerns regarding Stephanie's financial requests, and his desire for me to continue as his caregiver. The pages trembled in my hands as I read his lucid thoughts from before the worst decline. The evidence came at a terrible cost. Norman's final clear months had been consumed by legal preparations instead of peace. Every notarized document document represented time he'd spent in lawyers' offices rather than enjoying his remaining clarity. The bank records showed multiple visits during periods I thought he was resting. He'd hidden his activities to avoid worrying me, bearing the burden alone. I understood then that Norman had chosen protection over comfort. His actions revealed he'd known about Stephanie's intentions and tried to shield me legally. The weight of his sacrifice settled heavily as I photocopied each document under the bank manager's watchful eye. These papers would prove everything, but they also showed how much of his precious lucid time had been stolen by this conflict. My commitment to honoring Norman's plan solidified as I left the bank. Despite knowing it would permanently fracture the extended family, I would use his evidence to ensure his wishes were respected. The photocopies went straight to my lawyer, who began preparing for the emergency hearing. That night, I sat with Norman during his evening confusion, holding his hand and promising to see his plan through. Stephanie's overconfidence became her downfall when her social media posts contradicted her sworn statements. While reviewing her guardianship petition, I cross-referenced dates with her online activity. Screenshots showed her posting from a music festival in another state during the exact week she'd claimed to be providing round-the-clock care. Her Instagram stories from that period showed her drinking with friends, while her legal documents claimed she was administering Norman's medications. I compiled the contradictions methodically, creating a timeline that exposed her lies. The timestamps on her posts aligned perfectly with Norman's medical records, showing missed appointments and medication errors. Her need for online validation had created an undeniable paper trail. My lawyer's eyes widened as I presented the evidence, immediately recognizing its impact. The courtroom's seating arrangement on hearing day starkly illustrated my isolation. Stephanie's side overflowed with family members, their unified presence a visual testament to her campaign's success. I sat alone on my side, my only company the empty chairs that might have held supporters if circumstances were different. The physical representation of my alienation from the family was overwhelming, but I straightened my shoulders and focused on the judge. Both of us showed our exhaustion through unconscious habits. I caught myself pulling at my hair, a nervous tic that had developed over months of stress. Across the aisle, Stephanie gnawed at her carefully manicured nails, the polish chipped and ragged. We'd both paid a price for this battle, though neither would admit it. The judge observed our deterioration with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen family destruction before. Truth emerged through methodical presentation rather than dramatic revelations. My lawyer presented the timeline of inconsistencies, each documented lie building upon the previous one. Bank records, social media posts, and medical documentation painted a clear picture without requiring emotional appeals. The judge's expression remained neutral as evidence accumulated, but I noticed her taking extensive notes. The bank teller's testimony provided unexpected corroboration. Subpoenaed properly with bank approval, she described Stephanie's confusion about Norman's account access, her multiple attempts to withdraw large sums without proper documentation. The teller's careful professionalism as she recounted these interactions under oath lent credibility to her observations. She mentioned Stephanie's agitation when told she needed additional authorization, her demands to speak with managers. The judge ordered a professional evaluation of Norman's current condition and comprehensive review of all financial transactions. Court-appointed evaluators would assess his care needs objectively, removing family bias from the equation. The financial audit would trace every withdrawal, every transfer, every suspicious transaction from the past 2 years. Stephanie's face paled at this announcement, her lawyer whispering urgently in her ear. The safety deposit box evidence underwent authentication despite Stephanie's challenges to my access. Bank records confirmed Norman had added me as an authorized user 3 years ago, during a documented period of clarity. The handwriting expert's preliminary analysis confirmed Norman's signature on the documents, noting consistency with known samples from before his decline. Stephanie's lawyer's attempts to discredit the evidence faltered against professional verification. The analysis revealed systematic exploitation within complex family dynamics. While Stephanie had indeed manipulated Norman for money, the evaluation also showed genuine concern mixed with her financial motivations. The situation wasn't simply black and white, but still clearly wrong. The judge acknowledged this complexity, while maintaining that exploitation had occurred. The preliminary findings indicated full forensic analysis would likely strengthen these conclusions. Stephanie's breakdown during the proceedings revealed the depth of her delusion. She sobbed uncontrollably, insisting she was Norman's real caregiver despite living states away, deserving inheritance for loving him from a distance. Her genuine belief in her own narrative made her tears real, even as her claims remained false. The courtroom watched her collapse with a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. The judge offered me input on recommendations for Stephanie's consequences and future family contact. This unexpected opportunity to influence the outcome forced me to examine my true goals. Revenge would be easy to pursue, but Norman wouldn't want his daughter destroyed. I spent the recess considering what justice meant versus what healing required. I chose restorative over punitive measures, requesting family therapy and financial monitoring rather than complete estrangement. The judge appeared surprised by my restraint, asking if I understood I could push for harsher consequences. I explained that Norman would want family healing, not further destruction. My choice to prioritize restoration over revenge honored the man who'd raised me to be better than family conflicts. The court returned immediate custody and financial control to me with oversight provisions. A court-appointed monitor would review major decisions and financial transactions, protecting Norman while acknowledging my role as primary caregiver. The relief of regaining legal authority mixed with exhaustion from the battle required to achieve it. Stephanie's loss of control was immediate and comprehensive. The extended family divided permanently along loyalty lines. Some relatives approached me after the hearing, apologizing for believing Stephanie's lies. Others maintained their support for her, unable to accept they'd been deceived. Uncle David avoided eye contact as he left with Stephanie's supporters, our relationship another casualty of her campaign. Holiday gatherings would never include everyone again. The family splintered beyond repair. I began rebuilding my life with permanent scars but clear conscience. Some relationships had burned beyond recovery, particularly with Aunt Marie and other relatives who'd enabled Stephanie. But unexpected support emerged from community members who'd watched the truth unfold. Mrs. E. Chen approached me outside the courthouse, tears in her eyes as she apologized for misjudging the situation. Mr. Rodriguez simply nodded from across the parking lot, his small gesture meaning everything. Legal protections established through the case would help prevent future exploitation. The court mandated restricted access protocols for Norman's care, requiring requiring documentation for all family visits. Financial monitoring systems would flag suspicious transactions automatically. While these measures couldn't undo past damage, they would protect Norman's remaining years. The judge noted these provisions could serve as a model for other vulnerable adult cases. The aftermath settled into a new routine. Stephanie faced court-mandated counseling for boundary issues, while I focused on Norman's daily care with renewed legal protection. The house felt different without the constant threat of her interference, though Norman still occasionally asked for her during confused moments. I would explain gently that she was getting help, maintaining compassion despite everything. Norman deserved peace in his remaining time, and I would ensure he had it. The victory felt hollow but necessary. Justice imperfect but achieved.